Super excited to present Ms. Julie Krieger. She is an Agile coach with many years of experience in multiple Agile frameworks. You guys are in the right place to get your questions answered. We are also very excited because she will be the sign language translator for the Agile International Conference for a keynote speaker. But I'll let her share a little bit about her background, and she has participated in many events and provided also that type of service. But I'll let you kind of share a little bit about that. But we're excited today talking about Kanban concepts and team adoption. So you guys are in the right place. Get ready for all your questions. We got a ton of coaches here, but we're excited that Julie will be sharing her experiences with us this evening. Thank you so much, Julie.
You're welcome. So the way I usually like to do these kind of things is more of a conversation. So more of a back and forth conversation where we can talk and I can share the experience that we've had at TrackPhone and also hear some things from you guys as well and your experiences. So I'll start kicking it off by our experience, but then please feel free to chime in. I want to also point out I'm really excited to see some faces I haven't seen in a while. So you know who you are. Like I'm super excited to see Patrick. I think I see Chuck in there. I saw Marcella earlier today, and I haven't had a chance to see you guys in a while. So let me go ahead and share my presentation. It's really not, it's pretty simple, but let me put this on the screen. So I'm an Agile coach from TrackPhone. I've been with them for a couple of years now, but I've been a coach for a long time. It's a passion of mine, and anyone who's worked with me before definitely knows that. And so I've been very involved with SFAA over the years, different times for different reasons. So when I was asked to speak about Kanban or a topic of interest, I thought, ooh, Kanban, let me talk about that. So some little background on that. I was asked about a year ago to launch the Kanban teams. I coach Kanban teams, but I had never launched Kanban teams. And so I was like, oh my goodness. And I was on my own. We didn't have a staff at the time to help each other because we were all pretty bare bone. And so I decided I'm not just going to learn this from a coaching standpoint, but I'm really going to get into it. And so I really dove into it and contacted people across the country. I nagged Patrick endlessly, teach me everything you know. Anyone around me, I was like, teach me everything you know so I can go in and really have an amazing experience with this team. And then what that's kind of done is created this passion for something like I said, I coached it before, but I had never launched teams in Kanban teams. And so as a result of launching these Kanban teams, I kind of took it to a different level from the perspective of it has to be something in your everyday life. It can't just be something you do just at work, right? It has to be something you live, eat, and breathe to really be able to then and share that with the team and help them understand it and adopt it. So one of the things that I look at when I go to look at a team, I assess a team, whether it's Kanban, Scrum, what framework they should do, is what type of situation would Kanban particularly be best suited for. So when a team immediately tells me, I want to do this or I want to do that, I kind of look at the overall picture and I say, okay, well, where are they? How does the work come in? Is it ticket-based? Is it coming in, is there a definitive start and end to the work, or is it very much just kind of flowing, like a service desk kind of flowing? And as I look at that, I start to assess, well, that if it's coming in with no real definitive start and end, that's probably Kanban. Could even be Scrumban, but it's definitely not Scrum because it'd be hard to have load in a sprint and know the sprint is going to end if you continually have things coming in, right? So that's one of the situations when we look at teams across. We have about 47 teams. So when we look at all the teams across the organization, we start to look at okay, well, you can segment. If you've got a team that's got stuff constantly coming in, you're going to be setting them up for failure if you set them up as Scrum. So, and those are some of the cases where we find Kanban works best. Some of the other thing is why choose Scrum over Kanban. So one of the things I alluded to was when you have teams that are not just service desk oriented, but where the things are coming from all over the place. And maybe the compliance related, that's a good opportunity to look at Scrum or or Kanban. If it's something very predictable, well, then that's a good opportunity for Scrum. If it's something that there's a lot of gray ambiguity, that's a good opportunity for Scrum as well. But if it's just constantly changing, then it's a better kind of for Kanban. So I'm curious, from your perspective and your work environment, what have you guys seen? Have you, when the work is coming in, what have you had experience with?
So in my organization, hi, my name is Benka. In my organization, we have a mixture. We have some teams that are more operation-like, and the work just keeps coming, like, enhancement tickets, change tickets, and things like that. So they follow the Kanban model. And for the other parts, is more predictable, like engineering, architecture. Um, Architecture is integrated with Scrum, so the engineering, with engineering, and they both use Scrum because the work is it's easily prioritized and it's more predictable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's gray. That's where Scrum really comes into play because you can kind of figure that out, take chunks of it, and figure it out. So, all right, that's good. So, one of the things we learned at TrackFun, I'll talk for a minute, 15 minutes about the TrackFun experience. When we started rolling out Kanban teams, we initially used to do a week-long, like a week-long session where we would, do a whole Kanban thing for a week. And then teams will kind of walk away feeling overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I have all this information I have to memorize, all this information I have to apply. How do I apply it? What do I do? And then just kind of feeling like, I don't know where to start. Even though they had a coach assigned to them, not really knowing, where's the best place to start and how to start. So what we started doing is kind of breaking it down, really breaking it down for them. Okay, there's some basic things we got to do. We know we need to do the daily stand-up. So we got to teach that. We know we need to do all the team-based cadences. We got to do right off the bat. And then as we progress, then they pick another one. So for example, maybe they pick the operational review. Maybe they pick the strategy. They start pulling in some of the higher level things. And then, but it starts off from a very basic, where we talk about almost like an assembly line. If you have an assembly line in your day-to-day, what types of things you need to know, what types of things you need to do, how do you look at efficiency and waste? And as we started applying more tactical perspectives, we started to find that teams and started feeling less and less overwhelmed because it was more about a journey. It was about a journey that we're doing together, not like I teach you and then you're on your own, but more like, okay, I teach you, we stay together, we practice it, and eventually I go more to the back of the room and the team is more to the front. And they start to really take it on. It takes on a life of its own. And then they start asking more questions and they start applying it more and finding interesting ways to apply it as opposed to just a straightforward, like, okay, it's Kanban, I'm just going to apply it this way. And I've seen some really interesting things that teams have done to apply it, where they've taken it from its ordinary textbook to something tactical and really been able to say, okay, I get it. I understand it. This is how I'm going to apply it. But with anything, Kanban can be very siloed. So one of the things that we really focus on is, okay, how do we keep the team element with the framework? How do we keep that part going? And so there's a portion of this. Sometimes I stop with the framework part of it and focus more on the team aspect of it. Focus more on, things like I had one team that every day for a week, they had to check in with somebody else and see what their teammate needed. How can I help you? They had to be able to speak and come to the stand-up. In addition to talking about what they were working on, they had to talk about, well, okay, let's say it's Regina and I. Okay, well, so I checked in with Regina, and Regina is working on such and such, and she's doing really good with that. She doesn't need any help. And then, and then it would flip-flop, almost like they had partners. And what it did was it created that bonding. It created the bonding so that way, yes, we are working on a framework that emphasizes efficiency and we don't, not having any waste, but we still got to remember the human touch. And so things like that really help. Those team building activities really help keep that going for them. And what I found, we have a high percentage of offshore. And so I just say that the offshore is just a lake away. They're just on the other side of the lake. So we just got to bring everybody together. And these kinds of team building activities really help to kind of bring that fluidity to be able to, like they would ask each other questions. Like one week was, what are you working on? And being able to speak to that. Everybody had to get up and speak to that. Another week was getting to speak on something about someone that you found out, something interesting you learned about your teammate. And so it was taking the framework, but then adding some team building elements to it. And what I found is as we did that, and it kind of married up very nicely, to be able to make it very fluid. And then the other thing is we started, really asking them at least I did, what would you like to do next? And so I would show them all the cadences. Okay, there's the basic ones, like I said, but then, okay, which one would you like to focus on next? And so then I would teach them that, and then they would do it for a couple of weeks, and then they would come back to me, okay, we're ready for the next one now. And then I did repeat the same thing. And then, and after a while, they really started to has life of its own. And teams stopped feeling overwhelmed and started feeling like, okay, I'm starting to get this, and really embracing it. One of the things Marcel and I talked about was obstacles. What were the obstacles? And I had to think for a minute because they weren't very noticeable. It wasn't like when I had rolled out Scrum and teams would be like, well, I don't want to, I'm going to take 10 minutes to give my update. This really, like once they started to get the hang of the idea, and we would go back to, we played a game called Scrumban. And we would go back to Scrumban and back to the jokes around Scrumban. Don't forget this. Don't, hey, you're not sharing. Hey, you're not asking, but they would do it with each other. And so they would all start laughing. And the game became a way to have that camaraderie, but reinforce what we were learning, what they were learning. And as a coach, it kind of gave me some insight as to the personalities and how they were processing things. And based on how they were processing things, gave me insight on how it would teach the next thing and then the next thing. So yeah, we really didn't, but when I would tell you, when I had done, when I rolled out Scrum teams, it was always like, well, they would want to a la carte their ceremonies. Oh, I want to do this one. I don't want to do this one. I want to do this one, but I don't want to invite all the stakeholders. I'm not ready yet, With Kanban, it really wasn't, because it was so much of an evolution and so much of them driving it and not needing to push it, like really as, push, push, push. I found the teams they embraced it more. They took it on more. They it was like their journey. Now, I will say one challenge I have sometimes is that teams get comfortable. I know it all. I got it. So now we have to get the motor moving again and get them to remind them that, wait, Kanban is not about stopping, once you got it all. Kanban is about continually, evolving. So, changing and looking at what you can do and how you can do it and employing different tools to come about a solution. So, for example, one team, I did an exercise that looks at all the opportunities of waste. And I taught them how to do this, so they could do it themselves. And another, one of the sessions I taught them another tool. So it was always about teaching different tools. But the only challenge and one obstacle I face at times is teams do get comfortable, and when they get comfortable, you kind of have to help shake it up a little bit. So I want to kind of stop here and hear from you guys. What are some challenges you've had when it comes to rolling out teams, and maybe the community can help solve some of those challenges or help give you some ideas on some of those challenges you might have had. So I'll pause and give it back to the floor.
Marcelo, you can monitor, I guess, the chat line as well, if any good comments are coming out there.
Well, Taz has been sharing some interesting things like her craft club acronym. I encourage you guys to check that out. What I will say is that I'll back up what Julie's saying, is that sometimes teams will get comfortable. And one of the things, because we've got our process and we're running our process, right, Julie? And they kind of get, I'm not going to say comfortable, they're going to get a little complacent. And so sometimes as a coach, you got to challenge them back a little bit and say, hey, try a few things. Is it really working the way we want it to work, right? And so I think, Julie's, tried those things, the question would be is, what do you guys do when your teams kind of get comfortable in their comfort space? What do you guys try out?
Right. Don't be shy, guys. We got 35 people on the line.
Marcelo, it looks like they never have problems, Marcelo. I think we got a pretty good group here, Marcelo. That's what it looks like. I'm looking around, and it looks like this is going to be like
So
perfect.
what are some things you guys might be curious about?
Yeah.
Anyone curious about anything related to Kanban?
I personally find it interesting that what you mentioned and Scrumban sounded from the first time I've heard about it so natural and kind of makes sense to use both and to kind of combine and mix. And I often see, especially online in many forums, this kind of like battle, one versus the other. And I was just trying to understand how is it possible that we all come from like, some principle values and yet there are so many differences in the way you view that and perceive that.
I think at the end of the day, efficiency is efficiency and waste is waste. Anyway, you cut it. Whatever framework you use, you still have those things to keep in mind. And using the Kanban is really good when you have a certain segment of work that's very predictable, and then a segment of work that's not predictable at all. And then when you marry the two together, then that gives it gives the team a way to work. So that way they can keep things moving. That's really what it's all about. How do we keep it moving? How do we be efficient? And how do we give the customer what they need, to market, when they need it. So that way we don't miss that window.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Julie, is one of the things that Kanban brings to the table, try to focus is what does the customer actually need? And are we focusing on that right now?
And
Are we
timing is
paying attention
everything.
to that?
Yeah. If I can add, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Listen, in my personal experience, what I've enjoyed the most, and kind of Julie's same experience, that I've actually enjoyed it, right? When we've gone to like business areas that are very process driven, that things are known already, and we implement Kanban or we recommend Kanban as techniques and best practices. As a coach, I've actually enjoyed getting to know their business because the team launches have been very exploratory, right? So imagine you have a department and a group of people that have a process that they're not very well organized. When you actually get there, I mean, they're asking for help for a reason, right? There's very little transparency and visibility. Things are manual. They're not even systems. They're like all over the place, and they have inputs and outputs coming in from different places, right? So when we go in there, we kind of map this out. Like, what are all the different types of work that they're doing? What's the cadence of all these different types of work? What do you call it? Can you classify it? Can you categorize things? Can you organize your work? The beauty of it is that it all comes from them. It's them working on that, is them designing their actual workflow that perhaps they have not had it in an organized manner. So the tools are great, but it's that exercise of them coming together and then saying, how can we be more transparent? All right, where do you have your roadblocks? Where are your blockers? How can we be leaner? How can we get rid of waste? It's kind of like a system that they kind of build. And what I do like about Kanban is that it could be very non-disruptive at first. It could just be, hey, whatever your current process is right now, let's just organize it better. Let's be more transparent, right? And so that's the beauty of it. I've learned a lot about their processes in the way it's kind of like my analysis hat and encouraging them, and they own it. And it's been a great experience for me when I've been doing that with certain teams. Just wanted to share that.
So
I think
Regina,
I hit something on the nail about transparency.
Yeah.
I think that when teams first start doing Kanban or even Scrum, any framework really, it's kind of awkward for them because all of a sudden they're having to share things they might not have had to share before, and having to share it in a certain way that's informative, not just words. And so training teams in any framework, how to say the right thing at the right time. Marcelo used to say the right conversation at the right time. And it really is that, teaching them how to feel comfortable to say what they need to say, and to trust each other. And as they give these updates and whatever it is that they need to say, or to surface like a roadblock, a blocker, to surface something that's not working right, it takes a lot of courage. And I always say when I'm working with the team, who's going to be my most courageous person? And there's always someone, then there's another one, then there's another one, but it kind of has to, like a starter, it has to set up with someone, and then they follow from there.
So I love that, Julie, because and Regina was kind of starting a couple of things that's always on my mind when I work with Kanban, is that you start telling people, go ahead and map out your process, or go ahead and map up. And this is sad to hear this. Some people don't even know. They don't know until they actually talk through it. There's some people that feel it's this way, the other people that feel this way. And having that courage and having the environment for them to at least talk through that properly, like you stated, Julie, I think is really important. But it is eye-opening for us as people facilitating that, to say, wow, how did they get their work done before?
Yeah.
And then the transparency that you see when you finally see it up there, and you finally see the work and what it takes to get that. It is a really, open, kind of, wow, this is the amount of stuff that it takes to get to there. So really nice. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, I always say this is a good opportunity when you're rolling out a framework, to look at your process, see what you can eliminate. Because sometimes you don't realize you've been doing something for so long just because it was important before, it had value before, but then you start asking yourself, when you roll out a process, roll out a framework, where is the value? Is this providing value or not so much? Can we reevaluate this? Because we want to try to get work through. One of the things that Marcelo taught me a long time ago was the refrigerator. I never forgot it. This is a long time ago. The refrigerator and the freezer. And I talk to that when I teach teams. And I always say, okay, you've got the refrigerator. Think of all the things, the spinach and the kale and I'm always thinking about things that go bad in my refrigerator, and the tomatoes. And, like if I'm not cooking these things that go bad. But the analogy there to draw, to reality is, if we don't use these things and they go bad, they're not, then what are we doing for the market? So for example, if, like something is needed and I don't do it, and I put off doing it, and it goes bad in the sense, the business we miss the opportunity in the market. If we miss the opportunity in the market, we miss a chance to be profitable at a particular functionality or feature or whatever it was, a product that we wanted to roll out. And so, when I see, like, for example, we use Jira. So when we look on the board and I see like the dot, and in TFS is another way of seeing it. And I always tell teams, if you see they come up with a policy, how many days something will sit for before they swarm on it. But I always tell them, look at those dots. Always looking at those dots, because that's waste. Think of all those things in your refrigerator that are going to go bad because you just let it sit. Or think of it from a business perspective. Think of all those opportunities that you might be missing by letting something sit and not prioritizing it correctly. And maybe by loading in too much or taking on too much. And then it resonates with them. They start to think about that.
Julie, can I be clear? Marcelo does not have fruits, vegetables, and all that stuff. That's not what he normally has in his refrigerator. I want to make sure.
So what are some other things, some observations you guys have noticed regarding Kanban and teams' use of Kanban?
I would say, if you're going to use the word Kanban, be ready for resistance. I would say just use common vernacular, right? Things that you don't have to use the word Kanban, right? To get your point across, right? Or to demonstrate the value in Kanban, or the value in the outcomes, right? For instance, if you're trying to maximize value by somehow changing something, a process or continuous improvement, just don't use the words. Try to find some different words, because what I find is sometimes those words really turn people off and they automatically will resist. Yeah. So if you can find some more human words, yeah, human relatable words, you might, yeah, you might, you might experience less resistance.
Yeah, I like that, how you coined it, human words. That's totally true. There's that I Love Lucy video that we show, and I
Well,
love
I've done,
Lucy.
yeah, I love that one. I show that all the time. Everybody seems to love that one.
And I always bring up the chocolate and how much I love chocolate, but I don't want to be eating all the chocolate. And so I bring that video up a lot with my teams, and they always laugh. But it's real. It's real,
Yeah, it
because
is, yes.
if you're afraid to say something, you're going to start hiding things. And it reminds them, no, we need to be transparent. We need to get it out there. We can't accept it. And then it goes back to business priorities. If we accept business priorities, and we don't push back at all, meaning the teams, we don't teach them how to push back and how to say when they can do something, and then it's the same as the I Love Lucy thing. They're taking the chocolate, yes, and then they're having to hide it or figure out how they're going to do something when they really can't, and they set themselves up for failure. And that's the last thing we want. We want everybody to walk away with a feel-good thing, and teach them to walk away with that. So yeah, I'm going to keep that in my mind, the human words. That's so true.
Mhm.
So what are some other experiences you guys have had regarding Kanban?
Actually, in the organization where I'm at, there was a successful implementation of Kanban. It worked flawlessly, yet when they tried to scale it or just have another team join, there was reluctance on behalf of the company, and they made that team go to Scrum.
Yeah, that
And
can be
Wow.
the adoption was heavily fought, in a sense that it wasn't given another break.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think that was?
Well, two things. One, probably the person who did implement it did not do a great job of explaining it. Secondly, the whole thing that Kanban obviously does let you start with what you have seemed a little bit too disorganized for them. They wanted something a little bit more prescriptive, a little bit more structured. So those were at least the two main observations. And the third, I would say, is that there was just a belief, probably a misguided belief, that Scrum just made more sense.
Yeah, I find
That's common.
honestly when teams, when you have people that are struggling at what you describe, it's really more of a mindset. They haven't fully adopted the mindset, more so than anything else. When they have adopted the mindset, then there's this level of patience there. But when they haven't, then they're just so kind of like in the middle of the struggling, not sure. And then that's when you start to see some of those things. I have one team actually that started going down that path, and there was some mindset opportunities there. It just kind of, it really came to light. But good insight, good feedback. So we've got a lot of people on the call. What have been some of your funny experiences regarding Kanban? Anybody have some funny experiences, or something that was something really positive that they were like, oh, or like a light bulb that went off?
I'll give you a funny one. Blockers. How do you deal with blockers? The team just got tired, and they were like, it's just constantly coming up, and this person's not, responding. So they actually went, again, this was when there was the manual boards, the stickies, we all lived in that world. They actually put a big picture of the person that was blocking them. And they wanted to show like, hey,
I like that.
you are holding us back. So that was very courageous from the team to actually come up with that.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
I'm gonna have to, yeah, I'm so gonna have to suggest
When you're in person, there's so many opportunities for different things like that. When you're remote, you really have to get creative. Think of how to do that. That's a good one.
Yeah, the funny part is that the person usually had the initials RR. I'll let somebody figure that one out. Who do we know with those initials? Just kidding. It was either RR or ML, one or the other. The usual culprits.
Roy Rogers?
No, no, they're on this call.
Not Ricky Ricardo?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
What are some challenges? Has anybody had any challenges with metrics? I'm curious, Kanban metrics. Has anybody had any challenges on that end?
I would say not that I necessarily had challenges with. I didn't have challenge with interpreting it or bringing it to the team because I started with one metric. But I think again, leadership management didn't get the idea of predictability forecasting until I was able to show them how you leverage it. Because at first they're like, oh, how do you do that? What? I don't understand how with the way the team is working, how would you be able to predict anything? Or, well, if the customer is saying, when will it be done? I can show you and it will be done. And so I sort of used actionable agile to show the Monte Carlo simulation and those kinds of things to show how you can answer those questions, right? From a 95%, 85%, 75% percentile. Yeah. So at first I say start again, because you're trying to make sure that they don't resist. So you got to start very slow with one metric, maybe work item aging, right? That tells so much. And people don't realize that how valuable that metric can be. And so, so we just showed those kinds of things over time and looked at the historical data, brought leadership in, and then started to talk a little bit about what are they seeing? And from that data, how can that data be valuable, and how we were able to actually use that to answer the question, when will it be done for the customer? So
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That was the metric that Julie was alluding to about the refrigerator versus the shelf. It's the how fresh is it metric.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I get it.
I mean, consider you go to the grocery store and you go to the produce section. When they stock the produce, they usually put the fresher produce actually in the back and move the older produce into the front. Why? Because they don't want it to go bad. They want you to take the things before they go bad and purchase them and take them home rather than having them sit longer on the shelf. Same concept. The longer it sits there, the less likely we are to pay attention to it unless something motivates us to do it. Does that make sense?
The more something sits on the shelf, the less likely, when you look at metrics, the more something sits on the shelf, the less likely, we're more likely we're going to miss that opportunity with the market, going to market. And
correct.
So they can actually use it versus getting it to market. And then they're like, it's not as important now as it was some months ago. So that's a major thing. So I'm curious, has anybody so one of the things that I had with one team, and I've actually had with a couple of teams, is when you start to look at the metrics, teams get kind of afraid. There's some fear that I've had to deal with there, that I've had to work through there, because teams feel like all of a sudden now you can see how things are going, your cycle time. You can look at the cycle time. And before they thought, oh, well, I'll just commit to it and do it and have it done in a week or 2 weeks, and who's really watching? But when you start to look at things like cycle time and lead time, all of a sudden it's a whole different ballgame. But what I remind teams of how I've helped them with this is to remind them about the assembly line, to remind them about the end goal. But the end, it's not about you, the person. It's about the work itself. It's about the overall trying to get it to market. And how do we help each other swarm to get it to market? And when I talk from that perspective, I say it's okay if it takes you longer. That's okay. What we need to know is how do we get more efficient? Like, what could be in your way? What could, and by talking to them all one-on-one at their levels, it's really, it helps them realize, look, we're all in this together. And there is going to be resistance at first, because all of a sudden there's transparency that wasn't there before.
Right.
And I find, as we go through the conversation and we talk about the benefits, and I keep reminding them, the end goal, the assembly line, they stop thinking about themselves, and they really do start to ask the question about how do we move this through? What's in the way? What's the blocker? Where is the opportunity for efficiency? And it could be, let's not wait to do a retrospective on this till we get to the retrospective or till we get to service delivery. Let's do it now. Let's talk about now what we can do to remove that impediment so it doesn't happen again. And it's a different kind of conversation. It's something to be aware of as you're working with a Kanban team and you start talking about metrics. It really helps them through that.
I think so one of my biggest challenges has been introducing the concept of limiting work in progress, right? Because traditionally, everybody's brain is sort of rigged to think, oh, the more I'm working on at the same time, the more I'm going to get done. That mental idea, like to shift away from that, has been a challenge, and to get the teams to discover it themselves has been one approach. Like, all right, maybe they're not ready or understand the concept, or they can't identify what their work in progress limits are going to be for whatever step that we're talking about. And then sometimes we just get started and then you start seeing things accumulate. That and then the process of understanding we got to start pulling instead of pushing. Those two, the pulling and the limiting work in progress, is one that they don't always get at first until they're working in the system. And then once they're working in the system and they're seeing it, they get it. They're like, oh, this is what we meant, what we meant in the training. Sometimes they have to experience it. So that's been a challenge for me. I'm like, when are they going to get it? When it's the right moment? They don't always accept that at the beginning, right? Just wanted to share that. If anybody has any stories about that or recommendations as well, I'm always learning on that one.
So I'm curious, anybody who's worked with Kanban teams, what have been your challenges with WIP that you want to share? And how have you maybe overcome them?
I don't want to keep talking, so I'm going to let others jump in before I say.
Any takers on that? WIP, anybody, any thoughts on it?
I mean, yeah, it's always a challenge, I think, when you talk about that. That's the one area where teams are going to mess up, right? It's just a matter, it's just a fact, right? But it's then those discussions that you have afterwards, right? About, well, what's happening here and why is this happening? And again, the question is, well, what number what limit do we start with? You just start, just grab a random number. And then as you start to you start to gather historical data through those things, and you start to talk about the constraints and talk about the bottlenecks and all the things that are happening in the flow, then you can start to figure out, okay, adjust this, maybe, go up, go down, and that kind of thing. So that's, for me, I just started out, like I said, with, hey, guys, what do you think about that, right? I started having a conversation and I said, well, what do you think in this particular stage? What would be a good number we could start with, right? I didn't make it too challenging. I just said, start with some numbers and let's talk about it, expect and adapt it. With, that's right.
And then you retrospect on it. And I always say, nothing is set in stone, guys. You can always change your mind, right?
Exactly.
And you're experimenting and figuring out what works best for you, and what works for you now may not work for you later. As long as they continue to have that open mind, to continue to have those conversations, then they're moving forward.
Exactly. It's a shift in mindset, right? And behaviors. You're just trying to say, hey, does this stage have capacity? If it doesn't have capacity, right? If you got a 5 and you got 5 things in there, clearly something has to move. I mean, obviously you can't move anything and pull anything in there. So you start to have these questions, and these discussions around this, right? And you can, those WIP limits are going to change quite a lot, right? And that should be the expectation, because it's not perfection, right? So that's what I would say. Just keep trying, keep doing it. When they start to violate it, hey, why are we violating it? Is it okay to violate it? Well, yeah, maybe, right? So that's kind of how I do it. And I've managed to, the teams I'm working with are pretty responsive to it right now. But I've had challenges in the past where, they just did not want to apply WIP limits whatsoever. I said, well, let's not apply WIP limits then. And then they saw they saw what happens when you don't. And then they say, okay, well, maybe we should. What if we do this, for a week? Let's just test it out. Let's experiment. Okay, we see the value. Yeah, somebody just mentioned Little's Law, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's how I've managed to do it with my teams. Traffic jams, yeah, exactly. And then one of the things I don't know if you've ever tried that. There's a little exercise you do, right, when you try to, answer the question, why is context switching bad, right? There's these little exercises you can do to show them why they want to focus on one thing, finish it, and then pull in based on capacity instead of trying to do 10 things at one time, right? Because many things are going to suffer.
That's what we do that when we do the kickoffs, and that helps them realize if I start this and stop this, start this and stop this, eventually we end up saying, well, what if you stop starting and start finishing? What would happen? And you ask that question, then they start to think about it for a second because it sounds reverse, and then they said, "Oh, maybe," like literally. And I gave an illustration of a bunch of bottles of water. So I've got, all these waters in my refrigerator that I show the refrigerator where they're all half, some of them have a little bit, some of them have this much, they all have different amounts. And all of a sudden the whole refrigerator, the whole top shelf of the refrigerator, and I show it, is full of water that's already had, I've already consumed some of it, not all of it. And then you see, well, what if I had just consumed 2 bottles and now I have guests come over and I don't have any water for them because I have literally have 20 bottles in my refrigerator and I have taken a sip of every single one of those bottles. And so now I don't have any water to give anybody. And then they start laughing because it's an analogy. If you start finishing what you have on your plate. So stop starting and start finishing so you can get to a point where you can actually complete something and move it to the right.
Yeah.
When we first go in and we start talking about WIP limits for teams, there's several different ways you could do it. One you could do is very aggressive, take half what you do today. Another way you could do it is if you have 10 people minus 1 or 2, that's how much you should have. So, that many items in a column. There's different ways to do it. There's formulas, but at the end of the day, it's teaching the team stop starting and start finishing. And when they see those bottles of the water in the refrigerator, there's a whole shelf full of bottles. That I have no water for company. Then all of a sudden they realize, okay, there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, because what you with is not delivering value.
Yep.
The customer's waiting for the value. How is all these half open, drunk,
right, exactly. I can't deliver anything if all these things I've started, all these things in flight. And it's really about what can we get to market. I can't get anything to market if I've started all these things and everything is in flight. And I had a team that felt very pressured. They were the BI team, and they felt very, very pressured because they get stuff from all over the organization at all different levels. And they felt like they had to, and some of the stakeholders are very loud, like, I want this now. And they felt pressured to cave in and take on more and more and more and more. And they come up with a limit per person of how many things each person was going to work on. So no more than 2 items. And it's very easy in Jira to not see that. And so what they started doing, because some people were taking on, and they have to govern themselves, so they started, going by name, so they could see, Julie has 5. Why is that? Okay, who's going to help Julie take 3? Things could be kind of team explicit policy. So we're only going to take on 2. So who's going to help Julie take on? Or should we put these back in the backlog? What should we do? And so they created conversations for them around what they can truly accomplish, what they can truly get to market, and not feeling that pressure, and also learning how to say no. In this case, I was working with the team to try to help them realize that they don't have to cave in. That there is, they can. Their metrics are a conversation in and of itself. I always say it's so much easier to have the metrics and use your ALM religiously, consistently, because then you have a conversation with metrics, not a conversation based on subjectivity. I'd rather have a common objective conversation. Look, these are what the metrics show. This is what I'm able to do, versus a subjective conversation, which is, I want to help them, but I can't, but I want to, but I can't. And that's when you end up with all those bottles of water, they're half drinking and there's nothing there, nothing's finished. Everything is started and nothing, is completed.
Mhm.
So when you guys think of, so I'm curious, as you've gone through, what are some of the things that you've noticed, that the positive outcomes you've seen with Kanban teams? Anybody have some stories on that? I'll share some of mine, but I want to hear from you guys. What are some opportunities that you've seen regarding Kanban, the use of Kanban?
Well, one of the things I've seen is that for Kanban teams, especially when they're a shared services team, it is one of the best implementations and ways to really service multiple teams at once. I think that would be a great example of what I saw from that one team.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I had a team that just when they put the framework in place and they really started using it, they came back to me and said, "Wow, what a relief! What a relief as a way to be able to manage the work." Because before they just felt like
Stay
it was
focused. I
jump
seen my
on.
team. They stay focused. Like they know what is their to-do list and what they have to do today and what are the issues. So that's really helping in my team.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that focus is indispensable.
Yeah.
I had a team that had everything in spreadsheets, right? And so when we finally put the Kanban together, it was like, wow, that transparency and visibility. So now what happens with the leaders that we're used to getting the status reports and we're used to having that one person coming over with a spreadsheet, we're like, nope, come over to the board, right? You want the
Yes.
information, it's there for you. Now you have data, which hopefully, right, helps the team then be more empowered to show the visibility of all the work that they have in progress. Okay, you want us to work on this, look at what we got in the queue, look at what we got in progress, look at what's working, then what do you want us to deprioritize? That's been very powerful. That's been very powerful, which helps then the education of helping leaders not push anymore, right? And that also, like the teams learning how to pull does take time as well. But the more transparent we are building those metrics as a means of also showing the leaders the data from different perspectives, that's also been very helpful as well.
Has anybody had experience with, has anyone had situations with vendors where they have been able to use, that the board all of a sudden shows a potential issue? I see some people smiling, like that, where they've been able to take the metrics and have a conversation with the vendor. Has anybody had a situation of that nature? No? Or anything where all of a sudden you realize, oh wait, this. So we had one team that had a couple of different vendors they work with, and they did not realize the speed at which the different vendors worked until they put on the board, until they started using Kanban. And then all of a sudden they started to see, oh, this vendor is quite fast and very responsive. And this one over here is not as much. And that create a conversation. The metrics create a conversation with the vendor. Can you put some more people on? Can you train up some more people? What can we do to get this moving faster? Marcelo.
Yeah, one of the points I want to make about this is an excellent topic, Julie, because this spans way, way, way out of IT. Okay, it sounds like a late night commercial. Is your legal department unhappy? Is your procurement department unhappy with how your vendors are performing? Is your CFO unsatisfied with how external vendors are delivering their projects? The answer is use a Kanban. Very straightforward. Apply Kanban regardless of whatever process they use internally. There's stuff they have to do. There's stuff that they say that they're working on, and there's stuff that they say that they've done. You measure that simple workflow, okay? And you make those three functions inside of your organization happy. Legal sees that your contracts are performing or not. Procurement gets off of the CFO's radar and the bullseye comes off their backs because they approved a vendor who is unperforming or underperforming. And the CFO gets their enforceability for their contracts so that they don't pay for what they don't feel like paying. 3 pains in one. There you go.
Yep. I love that Kanban brings transparency. It brings an opportunity for conversation. It can bring people together to focus on a common goal, their common mission. It really does. Like when people are, focused on getting the work through, and where can we create efficiencies? What can we do differently? And then looking at the metrics to answer those questions, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So Julie, this is where I struggle a little bit. It's some organizations, and you think of these, because if you think of Kanban, you think of steps, right? They're moving from this step to this step. But you've got some departments that are still incentivizing their employees a certain way. How many bugs do you find? And that's what's important for them. So for them to reach over and support and help, this whole idea of swarming, which I know it's the next step, right? You don't want to immediately do that because that just might be overwhelming, like Marcelo mentioned, right? But this whole idea of saying we are all going to work together to figure this out, and letting leaders need to be able to step back and kind of help the team get to that. That is a big struggle, because if not, what else do I do, Julie? That's what you pay me for, to manage my staff. Are you saying you don't need me? I mean, there's just a lot of interesting, uncomfortable feelings when those things are mentioned. So has anybody ever had leaders in Kanban that interject and kind of cause stress on the team? Or am I the only one that feels this?
Yes.
Yeah, you're not the only
In
one.
one project, so the senior leader, he always say, oh, let's do Agile, let's do Kanban. But one team, very creative, very genius people, he said, oh, for this team, well, I have to be flexible. And then he wants Kanban. So that's tricky how to handle both of them, right? Because teams say, oh, they always come up with innovative ideas. They keep changing their mind, like they're genius, but that's their job. The part of job, they have to come up with the new ideas, but they cannot complete. So that was the challenge.
One thing I want to kind of touch on is servant leadership, and how that plays in the Kanban. Where do you see servant leadership and Kanban as a framework? What's your thought on that?
Can you repeat one more time, please?
So servant leadership, and specifically as it relates to Kanban, how can certain leaders, for example, exhibit servant leadership in a Kanban if the team is doing Kanban? What are some different ways that leaders can exhibit that servant leadership?
No, as a Scrum Master, I was trying to convince them, motivate them. But from the senior leader, I had an order, okay, don't force them specifically with one team. I had to be very flexible. And one senior leader said he wants to see Kanban board. And one senior leader said, oh, no, go easy with them. Don't say anything to this team. I want you to go flexible with them. If they don't want to update Kanban board, they say, rather we finish our work. And after 4 days, they come up with another idea. Oh, we should do this way. We should do this way now. They're part of architecture. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I heard you say flexibility. I heard you say being supportive, helpful. Yeah, I mean, those are all because at the end of the day.
Then we are human, right? And that's a part of their job. The rest of the team has to be creative. And that's the way we hire them, because their brain works that.
Yes. I mean, there has to be, like leadership needs to be helpful, supportive, flexible, open, helping to remove those blockers. It's no longer about them doing the job. It's the team is doing the job. The team is doing the work. And they just need you to sometimes move some of those blockers that are there in their way so they can keep moving through. I always say that, I always go back to that. I love Lucy. Keep the assembly line moving. Keep it moving. And servant leadership is so important in terms of helping the team to keep that assembly line moving. Because once it starts to stop, and there could be some opportunities to help. I think sometimes when teams go to do a Kanban, leaders sometimes think, well, I don't know what to do now. I'm just kind of sitting here. I don't know what I can do. I don't know how I can help. And the ways to help a lot of times are just listening.
Yes, I agree with yes.
Being there.
Mm-hmm. Listen to them. Then give them an opportunity to bring the new ideas.
Bring new ideas. Listen to the ideas that are coming out. Help inspire. Help motivate. Be positive. It's like, I want to say servant leadership is not a linear thing. It is something. It is a mindset. Marcelo, you had your hand up.
No, I was clapping for what you just said.
What is that?
Julie, the only thing that
okay.
Julie,
Okay.
the only thing that's kind of troublesome, Julie, is that it depends on the team that you're working with and the maturity level of the team. So if you get a brand new team that's never done development, right, and you're their manager, how will you behave compared to now you have a team that's been there for many years and understands the product a lot better than you will ever? So it's just an interesting thing that leaders have to be adaptable, right? There might be shuhari involved, right? There might be where you're a little bit more tactical, but you're stepping back and you're showing them that you are taking steps, right? There should be a maturity level to say, look, I'm going to help you and I want you to get here. So now you're developing your employees. You're building their capabilities. That's the humble professional that you're talking about from that standpoint. But it does not mean that they're always completely hands off. That's to me is not as clear in the workplace, right? You've got to be careful. My opinion.
No, you're right.
Yep, I agree. I'm gonna grab a bottle of water.
All right. Now that we got rid of Julie, come on, Marcelo. Let's get the party started.
What do you mean get the
Here's
party
a question for the group. Here's a question of the group. How many of people have never heard of Kanban or is brand new to Kanban? How do you explain Kanban to somebody that just started? And tell me something that you're doing at home or anything that you're actually using Kanban for that's out of the ordinary. How about that? How would you explain it, or somehow you're using Kanban outside of the workplace that's pretty cool? Who wants to share?
Hello.
Taz, I know you want to share. Go ahead.
Oh, me? I mean, I use it for everything.
Huh?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Go for it.
No, I said, yeah, I use it for, I mean, there's personal Kanban, right? As well as obviously team Kanban. And so, yeah, obviously but from an individual, my own personal, yeah, I use Kanban for everything. For agile coaching, obviously I track my day-to-day. I track my exercise.
How's that going? How's that going?
Hey, I got my rowing. I love to row, so I got that set up. And yeah, on my boards. Yeah, I mean, you can use it for anything, right? It's all about visualizing, things and keeping things organized and allow you to be much more efficient and effective. And so for me, I just happen to love using Kanbans.
Anyone else that's used Kanban outside of the workplace? Come on, go for it.
Yes, I did.
Kanban all around.
Tell us.
Well, in personal development, to be fair, just because I don't really have the opportunity to use that much in a work environment at the moment. But I feel the more I learn about Kanban that I should be implementing it in my personal life even further. Like putting everything in a certain order, not taking too much at the same time, because I feel nowadays many people tend to do that, and we tend to want to grab everything and have sort of like multitask, but on a even higher level, and that's sometimes just really exhausting. So I feel like there's like a different level of value in Kanban there as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Julie, you're back. We've got a couple more minutes. Is there how else would you like to close this today, Julie, on your side?
Yes. So I want to just, put out there. If anybody has any questions that we didn't talk about, that we didn't answer, feel free to ping me. I'll put my information in the chat and ask me any questions you have. But just know that, Kanban is an evolutionary process. I always say, Rome wasn't built in one day. Kanban is quite the same. It wasn't put together in one day. And when you allow a team time and the journey to go through it and adopt it at the pace at their pace, they're more likely to stick and embrace it. And that's what you want as a coach, as someone in servant leadership. You want them to embrace it. You want them to love it, to have the passion that you have for it, and to be able to really get a lot out of it. So again, I'll put my information in the chat, and you guys can ask me any questions you have. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you guys. And I'm glad I got to see some of you I haven't seen in a very long time.
And like you just said, you're not going anywhere. Okay, so we have her. So anytime you have a question for her, we have a direct number. We can all spam her. We're good at this. I know where she lives. Okay, so we're good. So thank you, Julie. Great job. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate all the volunteer work you've done for the community. Okay, so this is great that you're also helping us in the conference. Okay, so